Hi, good morning, everybody, and even good evening, Michael, Anthony, and Peter. So we had last week a very interesting masterclass with one of the most demanded topic, which is penalty corners, and we looked on how to take advantage of defending a PC, attacking a PC. We looked at different ways of placing your defensive players, what strategies you can implement. And we've got the next one, which is how to get the PCs. So introduction, check the other videos. We've got Michael Nobbs and Anthony Thornton from Russia, Japan, India. And guys, that's gonna be the intro. I think you've got Peter to introduce as well. I'll let you get going.
Okay, well, Peter's obviously from Sydney, Australia. He's an A-grade coach here. He's a good friend of mine, so he'll enjoy these. And feel free to just jump in whenever you want to, Peter. And we've introduced you to the others. Anthony?
Yeah, we're going to start off, wrap up what we talked about with that last session, which was penalty corner focused. And if I can just summarise here for a moment, defensive corners, if we start there, there's a few general principles to work off. So defensive corners, you can't cover all options, right? So when you're setting up your defensive corners, your players need to understand a few different ways of defending so they can deal with whatever circumstance the opposition is going to deliver up to them. But it has to be organised by the coach and the way they're doing it. It's organised in training. That communication process has to be really good. The players need to know what to do. And then the coach has to make a decision on who is making the calls on the field as to what they do. So there's nothing wrong with varying a defensive strategy per corner in a game, but there has to be a really, really clear communication process so everyone in that defensive corner knows what's going on and everyone's comfortable with their roles.
Did all of you get
the
did all of you get that running presentation, PowerPoint presentation that we did? Okay, cool, good.
So we went through a few options, but it wasn't the extensive list. It wasn't the exhaustive list of all potential options you might use on defensive penalty corners. There was some options and talking about the principles and why you might use those options in a game. And then there's a whole range of variations from there. So defensive corners, in the end, you think about it, you can't stop them all, but your goalkeeper has to be the one that can stop them all. So working with the goalkeeper. And you can get to a lot of details if you want to on these things, picking up cues from the injection, cues from the stoppers, cues from whatever's happening in the top of the circle, even cues from the flicker in where the ball might go. All that stuff you can get to if you want to. It really is time dependent on how much time you can spend on those types of things. And the other thing is you want to start to influence some physical presence on opposition attacks when you're talking about defensive corners. So physicality comes into it, not letting players run into spaces and things like this are part of what you've got to do, but you don't do it in a rough agricultural way, shall we say. You do it in a much more subtle and careful way so you can manage the situation a bit better than getting yourself sent off or a player sent off or a penalty stroke or another corner when it might have been a play going your way. So that's all part of the defensive corners and what we talked about with a bunch of options. Attacking corners, we're gonna get a lot more detail on attacking corners because most people want to talk about drag flicking and that's fair enough, right? But as we also discussed, there's a weakness in goalkeepers around hitting the ball on corners. Their techniques are quite poor compared to what they used to be. So there's perhaps an opportunity to exploit that play now that isn't well used. And then other variations and teams at the Olympics displayed, flicking. And if you're the Belgian men, for example, when you had a good success rate, that's probably a fair strategy. But other teams whose success rate wasn't quite as good as the Belgium team, perhaps they needed to have some variation in what they were doing. And that then flowed into, coaches in a little bit of a a bubble mentality and not being able to think outside of where they're operating. It is sometimes difficult for coaches when they're in that situation to think outside that square and come up with something different that they might be able to do that might, upset and take out of rhythm any defensive team and what they might be doing. So all of those things are important factors in it. Some of them are quite big issues that you can deal with by themselves, like this whole coaching in a bubble and how you can get yourself out of that bubble is a subject in itself, because it happens to everybody when you're coaching, when you're in a little bubble. And what strategies can you put in place to move out of that bubble and challenge your thinking while you're in that bubble, whether that be for defensive corners, attacking corners, or anything else in the game for that matter. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah. Just remember as well, especially girls, coaching girls, most girls' teams don't have flickers, and the thing that you've got to remember when you're a defence, they don't have very good flickers, that everything will be a variation. So it's an easier thing to prepare, But the men's teams, well, some have good flickers, some don't have good flickers. But it's a really, it's this whole thing on drag flicking. One of the guys we're going to get Harman Preet and Sandeep will be guests on at some stage from India, talk about drag flicking to us as well. They're pretty useful. Sandeep, when he was flicking, was about 156 k's an hour. So he was pretty scary, that's for sure. But I'm not sure why a lot of women's teams don't actually have hitters. Many of your lower grade teams have hitters on penalty corners, or do you still use try flicking?
The girls' teams almost never flick.
Never flick.
All the girls' teams play variant corners or direct corners, what you're saying. But not a lot flicking. Also, in the highest league in the Netherlands, it's just maybe one or two teams, and the rest is hitting just the ball or hitting and then run everybody to it for the counter.
Or a disguised slap.
Yep.
Yeah.
Happens quite a lot.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
But I guess it's the same in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. In women's hockey, there's not a lot of flickers. There are some, but not many. And there are some that think they're good, but they're not good.
No.
And then there's a lot of slapping that goes on, and that's mediocre unless you can slap it really hard. So it is often they're looking to act out some variation of some description, which is often not well rehearsed, so therefore not great and not successful. The key in the end, right?
You guys mentioned Argentina as well.
Yeah, Argentina with their hit out, right?
Yeah.
So we talked on these corners about getting the ball to the top quickly, so you've got time to do what you want. And Argentina, did try hitting the ball out. It used to be what happened many years ago in hockey, that the ball was hit out on grass for the same reasons. The hitting in those days was better than these days, and Argentina couldn't get the ball out without it bouncing very often. So therefore, it really didn't matter what they had at the top because they couldn't get that executed. But you can understand what they're trying to do is get the ball out quicker. And I talked about the speeds of women getting the ball out at 75 to 80 Ks and the men going quicker than that to get the ball out to the top with enough time to do what you want to do at the top of the circle. And that was an issue when you watched the Olympics all the way through, that the teams wouldn't have enough time to do what they wanted to do because the ball just didn't get out quick enough.
And the other part to it, then you've got your drag flicker, takes too long to get to the ball. And then the trapper doesn't trap it properly, close enough to the line. As we said, the further back from the line, the further the runner out gets out. So it's got to be perfect, basically, to score a penalty corner goal. And the lower the grades, lower you go down in your grades, it's just never perfect. Just takes. But penalty corners win games. It's really simple,
Yeah.
If you can force penalty corners and score them, it takes so much pressure off your field goal scoring ability. It just makes so much difference. Yep.
Yeah. And always remember, when we're talking about these things, it's really easy to be a perfect hockey player on the sideline, right? I can tell you I'm the best hockey player that's ever been on the sideline, right? It's different when you're playing and when you're in the moment. So always remember those things when we're talking about this stuff. It's easy when you're observing from afar. And when you're in there doing those things, it's not quite that simple to be doing it and executing it. And we don't know. Those teams all might have worked really hard to get the ball out quicker, and that's the fastest they've ever got it out. Right? We don't know that. So just remember, you got to put it all in context of what's going on here. That we are perfect on the sideline, but when it comes to actually getting out there and doing it, it's a bit different.
That's why we're coaches, isn't it? That's why you coach women, Anthony. Oliver.
Yeah, because then I look better.
Only the Russian women now.
You want to see some of those, I tell you.
I wouldn't mind coaching them.
Hey, anybody, Joost, did you ever try any of those defensive corner things out with any of your teams during the last week or so? Have you done anything like that to try it out to see how they responded?
I already had my own. 1 second.
Yeah, Joost is a bit of a corner god.
I already made my own.
All Dutch think that, right?
I have it here.
Oh my God!
So for my team, I see a lot of things. We have the same, but I can imagine that a lot of people say, "Okay, nice. I didn't know that," because a lot of people don't understand how to play corners. But for me, it was nice to think about one thing last week was when you miss a corner, when they don't stop the corner, make the 4 places.
Yep.
Plan B.
That I discussed with my team. Yeah, plan B.
Yep.
And also the corner, of course, the FHA corner, India corner, that the ball goes 5 meters out. The positions again, that was interesting. Also the way of pressing. When you hit the ball, when the ball is going 5 meters outside, you press different than the normal press. That was interesting.
Defensive setup, you mean?
But
yes.
For me, yeah. For me, the corner agreements with my team is already made in this maps for myself.
Yeah.
Joost,
I'll write out a couple of plan Bs that we use that might be interesting for you to use, because we know they work because we've done them quite a few times. So I'll write out a couple and send them to you. Yeah.
There's a lot of things in hockey that you've got to have the plan Bs in place, right? So oftentimes you think about cover defense in a game of hockey, that's really your plan B on defending. So if your help side people aren't doing the plan B and your ball side people fail, then what happens? You generally are going to concede a goal. So remember, a lot of these things we talk about, you're going to have a B option, a C option, a D option, because that's just the nature of the game of hockey. But there are some moments where at the end of the day, you're just going to expect the player to do something and it's just got to work. Right? It could be a trap the ball, it could be a whatever, but there is a lot of situations when you're going to have a plan B. And preferably that's most of them, because you can't assume there's never going to be an error in a game of hockey, because hockey is a game of errors. It's the nature of the game.
Yeah. Used to many of your players or even Oliver stand up and hit, or do they just do slap hitting all the time?
Slap hitting.
Slap hitting?
Very rarely see people hitting a ball in the game unless it's a player under pressure just trying to hit it away down the line or something like that. And I think it's a really underused skill, because I think you can break the line so much more effectively by hitting the ball. But you need to know when to do it.
It's interesting because just in 1982, the Netherlands did a big study on the ball, how much time the ball spends in the air, because artificial turfs were developed to be like natural grass. Unfortunately, it bounces more than natural grass. So in a game, the ball is in the air about 78% of the time because of the amount of bounces the ball bounces. So interestingly, when we all first started playing, we'd trap upright, and you'll find the top players all trap upright, as well as flat, but they generally have very, very good upright traps. That's simply because the ball bounces a lot. But you find the lower down you go in the grades, as you say, Oliver, they slap hit all the time. But once again, you remember we talked about those areas to enter the circle in on a 45 degrees directly in front type areas. It was funny because we watched an Australian rules football game last night, and there was a team called the Bulldogs. They haven't won a premiership in 57 years.
Demons.
They were
it's Melbourne Demons, it was.
What was it called? What were they? The Demons.
Melbourne Demons, yeah.
Oh, Melbourne Demons haven't won in 57 years. They were losing at the end of half time, I think. Anyway, they came out. And have you ever seen an Aussie rules football game?
Yeah.
It's much harder, right?
It's got about 18, about 36 meatheads running around. But they're pretty good, though, pretty good. But anyway, straight after half-time, they scored 8 consecutive goals directly through the middle of the field. Directly through the middle of the field, which goes contrary to what we do in hockey sometimes. But generally, remember what we talked about, most goals in hockey nowadays with good teams are scored through the middle of the field and how that's set up. But it was an interesting observation, Anthony, we were looking last night, just saying it's faster to score through the middle and it's also far more effective as well. So
there has been some crossover between hockey and AFL here, given the nature of the games is a 360-degree game, so there's no offsides and things like that. And where AFL has looked to learn from hockey is movement of the ball to the help side. There's a big area that AFL has learned from. And then the attacking strategies that hockey uses, they can apply with a little bit of modification into AFL. So they apply it from hockey into AFL. And there have been several people over time have worked with different AFL teams and helped them, including me working with the Sydney Swans here some years ago and changing what they were doing. So there is crossover in these sports, so you can learn from other sports how you do it. And it's important to understand that. And Michael showed, some stats around success in attacking the top third of the goal, top third of the circle. And this is really driven from the Germans and what the Germans did. And I'm unsure about whether that was simply because the players they had at the time meant it went through the middle of the field or whether they deliberately did it. And I suspect it's a bit of both. But when you took it away from the Germans, and the Germans at that time in the early 2000s were an outstanding hockey team. If you took it away from the Germans, say, well, they're a bloody good side. What about other games of hockey? What do you see? And invariably what you see is success from goals and corners generally comes from the top third of the circle. If you're on the back line, you may keep the ball and you may get a corner, cool. But unless who you're playing is really poor, it's hard to score a goal from there.
have we got time to have a quick look at a couple of goals? Charles, can you give me sharing capabilities?
Yes. So we've got 10 minutes. So
This won't take long. They're actually the Dutch Thueux class. It won't take long.
15 minutes, right?
So you should be able to share now.
Should be shared. Okay, hold on 2 seconds. Let me just get the...
But also remember, attacking through the top of the circle is much harder. It puts much more pressure on execution of skills of players. Because defenders are all told to defend the middle of the circle.
So everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, look, if you just have a look in terms of where the things are scored going through the middle, but we'll go through that later. But this is just a very, hopefully you can see this. Oops, maybe I've got to go down here.
You have also that tip-in goal of this guy?
Yeah, this one here.
Crazy.
Yeah. How many times were you successful on that one?
Yeah, he did it. He did it again a couple of weeks ago.
Did he really?
Yes.
But if you have a look at where the angle it came from, though, now have a look at this guy going through the middle. This was a freaky goal too, obviously.
Yeah, the lob. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good lob.
Yeah. And he's the boss, the next coach of the Netherlands Dutch team.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah. Tomorrow I sit with this guy.
Oh, excellent. But this,
Nice,
I mean, look at the angle he's coming in from, 45 degrees again. This direct approach to the circle means it's really difficult for defenders to say, is he going to pass it to my left or my right?
Exceptional qualities, right?
He's not a bad player as well.
I mean, that's a pretty freaky goal too.
Yeah. We are looking at some really good hockey players, right? So it makes a difference here. But relatively speaking, at each of the levels that anybody's at, you can still do these things because the skill level of the players is all relatively the same.
Yeah. The way he opens this shot is insane.
It's good. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he opens a shot, but then takes the defender out of play by doing that too.
And this is one of the few, I think there were 2 goals scored from out wide going across, but the majority of them were directly through that middle area.
Yeah.
So nearly finished. That's pretty good goal.
Last week, off-class goals were quite impressive as well.
Oh, they were very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is the last one.
So in all these situations, you've got to understand how you get into the circumstance where you've got some space at the top of the circle. Speed's a factor in all of this, and how quickly you're moving the ball. So moving the bodies, moving the ball, where you're moving the ball to, across the field. When we talk about width in a game of hockey, what it looks like, because in the old days when I had some hair and was younger, width was a strike forward standing on the sideline. Well, that's not applicable these days. Might happen, and that's okay, right? But you might get width from your back defender who's standing on halfway, and that's your width. Right? And you've got to think more laterally around how these things happen, and ball movement being the key to creating the space. And then remember a couple of meetings ago, I talked about clean eliminations, how I count those as an analytical tool in the game of hockey. So clean eliminations also give you space, right? And if you can get those eliminations happening in the right part of the field, then you've got a space in the attacking area. Because if you get those clean eliminations happening in your defensive circle, well, one, they're high risk strategy, and secondly, it's not really going to add a whole lot of value for you in the defensive circle, right? But if you're getting that in the attacking third, then you've got a whole bunch of space, and you're forcing the opposition to move defenders if you can make that happen.
So what we kind of figured out when we did all the analysis work was coming through the middle is really the critical way of doing it, because when you're going through the middle, the player has to look to the left or the right all the time. If it's coming down one side, your vision is only focused on there. You don't have to worry about anything in terms of where it's just going to be on one side of you, so you don't have to worry left or right. So you've got your defenders placed in the circle. Everyone's covering each one's reverse, so you don't have to worry about the 4-stick trap and not the reverse stick trap. But when you're going directly, it's left and right. It's very, very difficult. And as Anthony said, it's 360 degree game. And so all the goals, and not just our sport, but a lot of sports, all come through those areas. So how do you set it up? We might do a session on how do you actually set up that to be most effective as well. And how do you defend it as well? Because that's an interesting in itself.
So that will be our next masterclass, will be on this, how do you create those opportunities for scoring goals, and that will be equally how do you create those for penalty corners. And penalty corners, you have a little bit more scope on what you might do, but the principles apply for both of them. When you're looking at attacking, you're going to looking for creating an opportunity where you might create a goal scoring chance. And the goal scoring chance can be a field goal or a penalty corner. At the moment, they are the same value. So either one is fine from an attacking point of view or scoring goal point of view. But certainly how you do it has significant influence on your success, because you can get a bunch of corners getting the ball in on the T-spot, on the back line, and that's okay. Unless you've got a really significant corner threat, then getting those corners is almost detrimental. Because unless you've got a really good corner threat, a really good flicker in whatever level you're playing at, a really good corner hitter, or whatever it might be, then really opposition defensive teams would be happy to give you corners, because you're not creating a threat for them when you're getting the ball on the T-spot. Right? You're not going to score a field goal from there. Well, you might, but it's unlikely. So that's why all these things are really important in how you do it. And if you've got a really good corner threat at the top of the circle, then great, go and get some corners. That's cool. But not everyone has that, and it's not always going to work for you.
Yeah, that's why from the umpiring side, I've always been wondering, why are you awarding a penalty corner, but is that really an advantage?
Some teams it's not, yeah.
Yeah. You got to remember, umpires make so many mistakes in the circle. It's not funny.
I think
So
sometimes
they
you
just make-
overcomplicate penalty corners as well. We look at it as if it's going to be direct at goal, but in reality, it's 6 against 4, 6 against 5, 7 against 5. So if you don't have a good penalty corner, change the mindset and play it out like a 6 against 5.
That's only one option. Just remember, though, you're going to be operating under pressure from an attacking point of view, and every additional pass, every additional trap you're going to make is one more chance for an error in a circle. That's the thing you're always going to have in your back of your mind. And you want to have a routine, right? So it can be almost close skills that are executed. The close skills means you can practice them religiously and have a really good routine happening. And that's the advantage of the drag flicking.
And also remember, your plan Bs work more often than not if everyone knows it's going to happen. Because the opposition don't know what's going to happen.
I'm curious to see what your plan Bs are.
We've got a few that work. They look ugly to start with, but they actually work. So I'll send them to you in the next couple of days. I'll send you a couple of them. You can have a go. But I think you'll be really surprised how they work. Because everyone watches and goes, oh, what's going on here? And it just gives you that extra fraction second to set it up nicely. Yep.
So we've got, we're supposed to only get a couple of seconds left.
Before you do, Charles, our guests coming up will be Alison Annan. She's going to be our next guest on. After that, Dr. Narinder Batra, president of FIH, will be one of our guests. He's agreed to come and tell us a little bit about hockey and what's going on in the COVID world. Simon Babbage will be on to give us an idea on business in sport. He's a Harvard-trained chartered accountant, very, very successful in business. So he's going to give us a talk on business and how you can raise money through governments and all those sorts of things, sponsorship and stuff. And then my brother-in-law, Mark Hagar, he was the coach of the GB women's team, is going to come on. And he likes beer. So, Joost, Anthony.
We're good, right?
I don't like beer.
He's going to cost me. He's going to cost me beer.
Has he managed to come back?
Better than dollars.
He's coming back to Perth. He'll be in Perth on the 5th of October, and he just said, "Sure, I'll come on. Just provide me beer." So he's a Queenslander, and they're just redneck beer drinkers.
So the thing about these things is from Oliver's point of view, is deliberate promotional strategies. Each one of those is quite a bit different. You know, Alison comes at it from a different perspective to Mark Hagar. So we might be able to say to Mark Hagar, what is the British system doing? You know, how do the clubs contribute to the national team success, or things like this? You know, what goes on with their system? You could ask that same question of Alison. You know, how do the Dutch clubs add to the success of the Dutch team? Do they add any value to that success? So those are all the things that you can compare those two systems on what happens, which are quite different in the way they work. And always, you know, we've talked about this before, the coach's responsibility in working with the club administrators is really important, right? You have to manage expectations on how you're going to go about your work. And if you're not doing that, you're really failing yourself. So Simon's going to come at it from a pure business perspective, and you have to approach it like a business, like a role in a business, because that's what you're doing. Could be a small business, it doesn't matter, it's still a business. And so to think about that from a promotional strategy, who should you have on listening to Simon and asking questions of Simon is a bit different in the way you may think about it. But you can also approach it from a coach's point of view by saying to someone like Simon, well, Simon, if you're the chairman of the board and I come to you and say the team's not as good as you thought it was, how would you approach it? Right? Because it's important, these things for a coach, they work with a board, and so you can get on the same page with the board on what's happening.
Yep.
So there's a few different things there. And Dr. Batra, you know, you should quiz him and say, how are you helping hockey at the lower levels? Right? What are you doing for the lower level clubs, the lower level countries, the lower level whatever? And ask him what the thoughts are, what the plans are, and he'll be happy to talk about it with you.
Excellent. So we are, for this session, we're gone with time. We're done with time. So thank you very much, everyone. You can find us on coachingstations.com. Subscriptions are open. We'll get that on the YouTube channel. So this chat will be on the YouTube channel. The sponsors are Mosquito, Hockey People, Tribaal, Hockey Surf, and anyone else who wants to sponsor this, they're very, very, very welcome.
Preferably a beer company.
Is that you, Joost? Are you there?
Or a champagne company?
No.
Joost has got a few bottles of champagne spare. We could raffle.
So everyone,
I heard there was another
Yes,
sponsor.
Tempest as well
Tempest.
is a partner as well. So everyone, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you.
Hang on a second, I'll just stop the recording.